Basketball is like jazz. There's a jazz musician, a guy, God, what's his name? If you know basketball, you know who I mean. Kenny G. God, glad I remembered that. People know who he is.
Welcome to Kenny's G League. You already know it's the only podcast all about the Rip City Remix. We are back into the season here. The Remix have returned to playing games after a brief break following the tip-off tournament. They're now into what the G League calls the regular season. We've had 3 games so far where the Remix have gone 1 win and 2 losses. We're not going to talk a whole lot about that today because we have a special guest, Sean Highkin of the Rose Garden Report. If you follow the Blazers at all, you probably know Sean's work. He does really awesome writing over at the Rose Garden Report, and he's covering every single game, giving a lot of in-depth insight into the team and what this season has been like so far. Go follow him for sure. He's an excellent follow. So we're going to have a good chat with him. Just wanted to get you up to date on where the season is at so far. Like I said, the team is 1-2 right now. The 1 win coming against the Clippers, where Remix player Bryce McGowan's had 46 that night. That was a wild game from him. Excited to see him ball out the rest of this season. And hopefully the team has a little bit of momentum here because it feels like they've kind of found a groove. They're finding what works a little bit better. They're finding some rotations that seem to be building some success for them. And I had a opportunity to ask Coach Oliva about what they've been doing in practices. He had mentioned earlier, before the season started, that they were looking forward to kind of being more experimental in practice and being more hands-on approaches into practice rather than kind of being about repetition in practice and drills in practice. And now it sounds like they want to be a little more experimental in what they do. So I was able to ask Coach Oliva about that. Let's hear a little from him, and then we will hop right into our chat with Sean Highkin. I know at the beginning of the season, you had talked about kind of being more innovative in how the team practices and prepares. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering what that's looked like so far, because to start the season, I think the team was 0-5, and they're kind of near 500 since then. So I'm just wondering how you're kind of seeing the approach to practices kind of play off into the season.
I mean, part of trying something new is trial and error, right?
Yeah.
And I think in the first few weeks, we did a good job of both things.
Sure.
Of trying and also of making errors sometimes. And I think one thing that since then we've been able to do is identify the things that have been working and the things that have not, both from a tactical perspective, but also from how are we transmitting things to the players. Like, for example, a lot of the stuff that we did at the start in order to give them freedom defensively, in order for them to be more aggressive and to create havoc a little bit more while still hiding each other's back. Like maybe some coaches would call it gamble. I would say our style of play is very much aggressive. I would say the way that we've been working on that, we've been very pleased on how the progression of the team has gone so far. Like we got a bunch of games now with 16, 17, 18 steals. Like sometimes we're watching clips and it's like we're playing not fundamental defense in the classical sense, but we're having each other's backs and we're creating havoc on the other team's offense, and we love when we do that. I think our approach to defensive glass has progressively got better, and that level of aggression of running, like I think we have still the highest pace in the league of like forcing turnovers in way, like kind of unleashing our, like what we've done in that side. I think the progression has been very clear on how much the guys have grown in that area. Offensively, earlier we run more into things that we were trying that were kind of not working out. I think we try to sometimes some of the freedom and the reach that we were offering created paralysis by analysis. And then I think since then we've shrunk what we've been doing and simplified it. And now we're back kind of at growing it from the shrunk core that we created.
Really appreciated that answer from Coach Oliva there. I think it kind of shows the progression that the team has already shown this year, which is pretty different than last season. I think that the team seems to be really taking some gambles, especially on defense. Shout out to Isaac Nogues Gonzalez, who you all know I'm a big fan of on the remix. And I think it's a perfect example of what they're trying to do on the defensive end, like Coach said there, causing havoc. And then kind of bringing things more centered around a few ideas on offense, and now maybe they can kind of grow that outwards. So with that, let's get into our conversation with Sean Highkin. Sean, thanks for joining me on the podcast today. Excited to talk about the remix a little bit and maybe some other stuff if we have the time. Well, first of all, let's just start in. We're like a third of the way through the remix season. What have you been enjoying watching from the remix so far this year?
It's been interesting to watch because I've been, ever since they announced over the summer that Serge was going to be the head coach. And then I started hearing that the reason that he was going to do that was because they really wanted to try out some different player development strategies and just use it as kind of a research and development lab for the organization. It's a little bit of a different approach because I had heard that they had offered the job to a couple of people who were kind of more traditional coaches that weren't like, they weren't using it as like an extension of the front office and in the way that they pivoted to doing with Serge. So I was just kind of interested to see how that was all going to play out. And I mean, they've been playing at a pretty breakneck pace. Like the last time I haven't looked at the G League. I haven't looked at the G League advanced stats recently, but the last time I did look at it, they were playing like 3 possessions per game faster than the second fastest team in the G League.
Yeah,
which, that's going to lead to some,
too.
Yeah. Are they?
It's interesting.
Like that?
I'll see if I can look it up now because they were leading the league in like 3-pointers and they were like second in points per game or something. And they were getting up and down the court.
I'll bet their turnover rate was also pretty high because that's kind of when you have players that are like not as developed, which is most of the G League.
Totally.
You have, you're going to have a lot of turnovers when you play that fast. So I'm pretty sure that's all.
Yeah, they're 29th in turnovers.
Yeah, that sounds right.
About 20 a game.
What about pace?
Let's see here. Right now they're 4th in points per game, 115. Let's see. Where else can I pull this? 3-point attempts. They're still second. 45 3-point attempts a game. Yeah, they're getting up.
They're flying. They're getting there. They're getting up and down. It's just really interesting to see kind of how and I did a story on this a couple months ago, and I was so like, I talked to Joe and I talked to Serge about it, and neither of them really wanted to tell me anything specific about like what these super innovative player development strategies were. But I'm assuming it's a lot of the same stuff as Alex Sarama, who was their player development. I know you talked to him on the podcast. He's with the Cavs now, but I assume it's a lot of kind of an extension of the same stuff, whatever his kind
That's
of
pretty much what
was.
I was told. Yeah, is that like the constraints-led approach of letting practices be more about like less repetition basically and more learning skills by doing is
trying stuff
kind of
out,
my understanding.
Yeah, which I mean, when it's the G League, the whole point of the G League, I mean, the whole I mean, not just at the play, like because look, like the player development level, like that's a big thing of the G League, but organizations also use it for, you look at some there were some of the, Mark Dagnall in Oklahoma City. Yeah. Nick Nurse was a G League head coach. Darko from the Raptors coached in the G League for a while. Like a bunch of like, you're more and more, you're starting to see like that pipeline.
Yeah.
So it's like that stuff, but then also like league wise, like some of these like they try out different rule changes there. Like I think they tried out the coaches challenge in the G League for a couple of seasons. Now they're doing the, one free throw to make for 2 points to try to speed up some of the games. They're like, so if you're an organization, if you're a front office, why not use the G League to say, hey, let's just try to push how we can, how we can play, play this kind of style. Whereas, it may not be fully developed, what your philosophy is to the point where you want to do that with an NBA team. but you can do it with the G League, and there's not really a lot of downside to it. So it's been interesting to see how the approach has changed a little bit. Whereas last year with Jim Moran, I feel like it was kind of just more of just a regular traditional G League team. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Obviously, they didn't make the playoffs in the G League last year, but they were over 500, and everybody liked Jim, and they had a couple of guys, Ashton Hagens and Taze Moore, who got call-ups at different points. So clearly, like, taking kind of the more traditional approach to the G League last year with the first year of the remix was good and was beneficial and did some good things for them. But it's been kind of interesting to see them, try this totally out of the box, totally different approach this year in the second season.
Yeah, I asked Oliva a little bit about that on Sunday. I'll probably either play the clip in this episode or talk about it up top or something. But that's kind of what he was talking about. He basically was saying that the first, I don't know, 4 or 5 games of the season where they didn't win any of those games. They went 0-5, but it was a lot of being super open-ended with what they wanted to do in games and doing that in practices. And then they basically shrunk it way down since then. And now they're just working on building it back up into what kind of things they can do in game, which, I mean, honestly, they've been, after those first 5 games, I think they're just slightly under 500. They're like 1 or 2 games under 500 after those first 5. And, so it's kind of interesting because you're kind of seeing, like, it doesn't maybe look like linear success or whatever, like maybe seeing Jim last year was like right out of the gate, oh, this team's kind of good. You can kind of see the outlines of a team here a little bit. And then this year it's like, okay, we're seeing the struggles of like trying new stuff and a whole new team almost, except for 3 guys or whatever. So it's been interesting this year, I think.
And I'm really interested to see what they do next year, because this thing with Surge is only going to be a 1-year thing, according to everybody.
Yeah.
So are they going to bring in a new coach who's going to be just kind of more of a traditional, like, kind of in the Jim Moran mold of, a young coach looking to get some coaching experience and then get onto an NBA staff like Jim did? Like, is that kind of what they're going to do? And is that whoever they bring in going to be? I mean, it's kind of, in a way, doing this with Surge is kind of a interesting, it's kind of probably the safer way to do that, because, like, if you're a young, inexperienced coach and you get brought into this job and Joe and his staff tell you, hey, we want you to just try all this crazy off the wall stuff, and you do it and it doesn't work and you look crazy, that's going to go on your record forever. Whereas Surge, he's in the front office. He's going to still have that job as one of Joe's assistant GMs after this season. So if they fall on their face trying all this stuff out, Surge doesn't have to worry about, like, oh, I'm never going to be able to get another coaching job after this happened. Like,
yeah, it's kind of a perfect little scenario they managed to get themselves into, where they really have an opportunity to just try some stuff kind of without having to worry about the repercussions later on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see here. So, like we were talking about, this season's been kind of different than last season, because last year we had like Ryan Rupert, Chris Murray, Moses Brown. I think there's maybe one guy I'm forgetting. Ish Wainwright got some run.
Ish Wainwright, that's right. Ish Wainwright. Chris, Ryan, Moses. Have any of the Blazers non-two-way guys? You've watched the remix more closely than I have. I go to a good amount of their home games, but I will fully admit I'm not watching remix games on TV when I'm not at the game. Have any of their non-two-way guys played for the remix this year? I'm pretty sure they have.
Zero crossover so far.
Yeah. Because last year it was Chris, it was Ryan. And then they also used it for, like, when Scoot was coming back from his ankle injury early in the season. And then when Shaden had the core surgery and he was getting ramped up, they had him practice with the remix a little bit.
Yep.
But
they didn't do that
last
this year.
It was a
Shaden's injury.
No, because that was a little bit less of a, that was an injury Shaden had dealt with before. It was kind of more of it just needed to heal up and then he was going to be good to go. Whereas the core thing, like, you have to build strength back up, and they also were really hoping to get him back, because Shaden didn't have a surgery for this thing. When you have a surgery, it's a little bit more of like a long rehab process.
Okay, yeah.
But you haven't really seen this year, like the last couple of years with the two-way spots, and really especially last year, which was the first year they had a G League team, it was a lot of like, because remember Skylar Mays was on a two-way, and then they convert when they had Scoot and Ant go down early in the season, they converted him to a regular contract, and then WAP plays one game with the remix on a two-way, and then they're like, no, you don't. He had like what he had like 37 and 12 or something, and they were like, okay, you don't need to play in the G League anymore,
right? Yeah,
and then like I guess like Baji spent a lot of time down there. This year, it's really just been their three two-way guys have mostly just been with the remix. Bryce McGowan's and Tajay Moore have played a little bit of garbage time, but other than that, like they've pretty much been with, they're not like they're with the remix right now. They're not even with the team on this road trip that they're on right now.
Yeah, it's just such a different season, and like personally I'm a little bummed because I want to see more Rupert or maybe I don't know.
Well, Chris Murray's been actually playing for the Blazers the last week or so.
He's looked
good
actually.
Yeah, like since like Jeremy's been out with the face, whatever this face thing is, he has. That's kind of a weird thing, but because of that, now like Danny and Tumani are the two starting forwards together, and so Chris is getting some of those minutes, and I think maybe once whatever happens at the deadline happens, maybe Ryan is going to start getting some of those. I do know that they really like what they've seen out of Ryan behind the scenes in practice. They feel like when he gets an opportunity, he's going to be ready for it. So maybe, and I think part of this also, like part of them not using it, not having to like use their two-way guys as much is they haven't had to. They've had their, and I've talked to Joe about this before, that like, it's so he's talked to me about before about how nice it is to be able to have their two-way guys actually just be with the remix and get to play and start and just spend time in the G League and not have to have them with the big team all the time because they just have so many guys injured. Because last year they just had so many guys going down all the time that like they actually had to, they had to play Baji for like a while with the Blazers when he probably wasn't really ready for it, or they had to play they had to give Justin Minaya a lot of minutes because so many guys were out at different times. And
that's right. Honestly, I had kind of forgotten how thin it got last year. Like Skylar Mays was like a phenomenon for like a week,
Yeah. And then they had to convert him to a full contract. And then even then when like Scoot got hurt, they was like, hey, do you remember Jamare Bouye?
Yeah. I remember him because I went to a game and just randomly was sitting next to like four people that went to high school with him, so they had flown into town just to see him play his one game for the Blazers. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like it's a totally night and day thing from the Blazers. I mean, even just injury wise, like this season's been crazy different.
Yeah, they've had some better luck. I mean, not perfect luck because like Rob's had his stuff. Donovan missed a couple weeks, but it's been last year the Blazers, and I realize this is a G League podcast, not an NBA podcast. I don't even know if you know that the remix have a NBA affiliate. I don't know if that's
I didn't know
the
that
jurisdiction of Kenny's G League. But
that's new.
But last year the Blazers' 5 most important players, who are Scoot Henderson, Anthony Simons, Shaden Sharp, Jeremy Grant, DeAndre Ayton, I don't know if you know who any of those guys are because they haven't. I mean, maybe you know who Scoot is because he played in the G League. Because he played for the Ignite. So that's
he was in the Ignite briefly. I've heard
the G League jurisdiction.
Okay, yeah.
But those 5 guys, you know how many games they all played together? We were all healthy at the same time.
Ooh, I do not.
4.
Really?
The entire season. So they had to use their G League guys a whole lot. And this year, like for the most part, guys have missed a little, they'll have a guy miss a little bit here and there. But like outside of Matisse Thybulle, there really hasn't been a ton of, serious long-term injuries. And so they've been able to keep their two-way guys in the G League and letting them actually play there instead of calling them up all the time because they need them. And so you're starting to see like Bryce McGowan's is like the John Morant of the G League, just dunking over everybody and dropping 40. It's hilarious.
For real. Yeah. I mean, I think that's the guy that if the Blazers were to like get thin in the second half of the year, it would be really fun to see him just get an opportunity. Like a DB Hooper opportunity
Yeah.
last year because, I mean, who knows what that would look like, but it's really fun watching him
Yeah.
just dominate in the G League this year.
It's always fun to see some of those guys who are kind of in baseball. There's that concept of a guy who's like a quadruple A player
I was
where
talking to
they're too
Gareth
good,
about that yesterday. Yeah.
where like you're too good to be in the minors, but you're not quite good enough to like
Hmm.
crack the majors. Kevin Knox is like the ultimate guy like that who, remix legend. I believe he's playing for the Santa Cruz Warriors now,
Yep.
but that's a guy who, dominates in the G League. He probably shouldn't be playing in the G League, but he's also not quite good enough to be in an NBA rotation. And
Hmm.
so when those guys get on the floor, it's always kind of interesting.
Yeah. I mean, he's probably Bryce is probably the perfect example of that with Knox because what did he score the other day? 46, I want to say.
Yeah.
And it just looked easy, you know, which is wild. And Nasir
Mhm.
Little too. I mean, even
Yeah.
Nasir
Good
is
for
in the G
Nas.
League, who I always wanted to be able to slide into the small forward spot for the Blazers. Not that I know who that is, but uh,
Well, now you
but
do because he's in the G League.
yeah, that's right. Now he's in the G League. And
Yeah.
he's having an okay season over there. It sounds like just
Yeah.
from kind of box score watching.
I I'm happy for Nas getting,
Yeah,
it seems like that's kind of, and also that's also just like a good sign that Nas is like really about it. Because
yeah,
there are some guys where, especially like former first round picks who, you know, kind of what happened last year with Mo Harkless when he was
yeah.
briefly on the remix was just, he thought it would kind of be an easy way to get back in the NBA. He was like, "Oh, I'll just, go play in the G League for a couple weeks and then a team will pick me up." And then when it came time for, you know, we're getting on a commercial flight and flying to Sioux Falls
Right.
or Grand Rapids or one of these places, like if you're really like about the, that travel and, that lifestyle, if you really want it that badly, you're gonna, bear through all that stuff. And I think, he was somebody that just decided like, you know what, I'm cool, I'm good. Whereas Nas, like, he's playing for the Heat G League team, which is the Sioux Falls Skyforce. So he's
Yeah.
playing in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Not a whole lot of direct flights anywhere. G
Right.
League teams all fly commercial. They don't stay in nearly as nice of hotels as NBA teams do. And Nas is kind of used to that in his. And I haven't talked to Nas in a while. He and I are actually pretty cool when he was on the Blazers. That was one of my favorite guys that I've covered in the last few years. But it seems like he seems like he's grinding. He's trying to get another opportunity in the NBA. And
Yeah.
personally, I hope he gets it, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe the Heat find themselves needing a wing in the future here in a little bit. I don't know. Who's to say?
Yeah.
They might be need a wing in a little bit. Uh,
Mhm.
I'd like to talk maybe a little bit about the WNBA expansion in Portland.
Yeah.
You kind of
Mhm.
you broke the news several months ago that
Mhm.
was kind of a go. What was that like? Kind of getting to be the first one to break the WNBA news in Portland.
That was interesting because I mean I've been chasing that for a couple years. By that point, it got to the 1 yard line the year before with a different ownership group, and then it fell apart because that ownership group turned out to maybe not have the kind of money that people thought that they had, and so it seemed like the W at Portland efforts had kind of just they'd blown their chances, and then especially like this past spring, the Toronto team was announced, and you just kind of didn't know whether Portland would still get back in the mix. That would have been 14, even though Kathy had said that Kathy Engelbert, the commissioner, had said that she wanted to get to 16 teams by 2028.
Okay.
But um clearly, I mean, obviously the W had decided that Portland was a market that they wanted to be in.
Right.
And it was just a matter of finding the right ownership group, which wasn't how they framed it originally when that effort fell apart. They said that it was because of the Blazers ownership, or not the Blazers ownership, but because of the Blazers arena renovation stuff.
Oh yeah. I forgot about
And
that.
by the way, the Blazers arena renovation plans still haven't been decided. They haven't figured out what summers
Oh
they're going to do
really?
the renovations. And clearly that wasn't a deal breaker for the
Yeah.
W because they still haven't decided that, but they
Right.
gave them a team once. I mean, I think the thing that was really the game changer was when the Bethals came in and bought the Thorns from Merritt Paulson.
Hmm.
And that's an ownership group that, A, clearly has money because they got their money that they're the father of that family. It's the two children, Lisa Bethal Mirage and Alex Bethal, that kind of run things day to day. Now their father started a swimwear manufacturing company in the 60s or 70s, and so they have their money from that. They have also like a lot of real estate stuff. They have their money from a bunch of different places, so it's not like what happened with the previous ownership group for the Portland W team, where the guy's company's stock traders and then he just loses all his money, and he can't do it. But then, and the other thing about it is that the Bethals have been in the NBA for a long time. Raj is the minority owner, is like the chief, the highest percentage minority owner of the Kings, and he's Vivek Ranadive's alternate governor for the Kings. So they've been involved in NBA business for like 10 years. And so when they came in and said, hey, we just bought the NWSL team in Portland. We think this is still a good market. We have the money. We want to maybe do a WNBA team here. I know you guys were thinking about it before, but like, let's see if we can get in. They didn't really have to do a lot of vetting of the Bethals because the league has already been in business with them and it's still the NBA, even though the WNBA is kind of its own thing. The NBA still runs it in a lot of ways in terms of like the NBA's board of governors was the ones that had to vote to officially approve the expansion teams. So,
really interesting. I didn't know.
They already knew the Bethals, so they didn't have to do a lot of vetting or do a lot of like, hey, we don't know who these guys are because it's they're already in the family.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. So that's set for 2026. Is that right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
So this coming season, the Golden State team is coming in.
Yeah, the Valkyries.
And then 26, both the Toronto Tempo, which is their newly announced name.
Oh yeah, it got accidentally leaked or something.
It got accidentally leaked by the league office by putting the name in a drop-down menu.
Yeah.
That's how their name got leaked by the league office, right? Accidentally.
I'm gonna be refreshing the drop-down menu every day.
Yeah,
I mean, find out what
the more I learn about the WNBA, the less surprised I am that happened.
That's funny.
but Toronto and Portland are both starting in 26.
Cool, that's awesome.
And so
I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I am, and at some point, probably December of next year, because they just did the Valkyries expansion draft in December of this year, like a month ago. So probably December of 25, they're gonna do the expansion draft for Portland and Toronto, and it's probably going to be kind of the same process, but they're so far away from that. They don't have a name, they don't have a logo, they don't have a team president, they don't have a GM, they don't have like any. I don't even think like they don't even have a full-time like PR person. Like I've got, I think they still have a firm that they subcontract that stuff out to. I've gotten a couple of press releases about how ticket sales have been, but other than that, I haven't really had any official communications with anybody. So I think they're still pretty early on in the process, but I would think in the next couple of months, they'll try to get some of that stuff put in place in order to, be able to, hire a GM, because, you're going to have to get, you're going to have to get that stuff in place, because you're going to have probably, you probably want to have a GM in place before the next season starts, so that person can spend next season like scouting and talent and seeing like who do we want to take in the expansion draft and all that kind of stuff. So it's gonna be interesting to see how and I've been following the Golden State stuff very closely, just kind of seeing how they put their thing together and the types of hires that they've made and kind of the approach that they took with how they did the expansion draft. A WNBA free agency starts up here in a couple weeks.
Oh, does it really? I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, I think at the end of January. I don't have the exact dates. I'm still kind of learning how the WNBA works.
Yeah, for sure.
I've covered the NBA professionally for 12 years, so I know how all that stuff works. I know like how free agency works and the CBA and all that stuff. The W, I'm still learning, and there's still some different rules about it that I'm still kind of getting my head around.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's going to be, I mean, they'll be fast tracking it sounds like a little bit, because that's only 10 months away or something like that.
It's kind of the same timeline so far as what Golden State has done. Golden State didn't hire a GM until May of this past year.
Oh, wow.
Toronto, I've heard, Toronto still doesn't have a GM. They have a team president. They don't have a GM. I've heard they want to have a GM relatively soon.
Cool.
So I don't know where that's at. I don't know who the Bethals are looking at. The team president is the first person they have to hire. They need, because that's going to be on the business side, the one that like gets the corporate sponsors and is involved in like the practice facility and designing the locker rooms and all that kind of stuff. Like the stuff on the business side, I don't know if you know Dwayne Hankins, the Blazers president of business ops, but the way that whole thing is divided is Dwayne does the business side and Joe does the basketball side, and they're kind of equal on the org chart, but they kind of oversee different things. But for a brand new franchise that you're launching from scratch, the business side person is who you need to hire first. Right. To get all that stuff put in place, like a name and logo and stuff. And then as these different times approach on the calendar, you hire a GM, and then that person is going to be in charge of like hiring a coach and building a coaching staff. And then that they all kind of work together with, who do we target in the expansion draft? What's going to be our process for free agency, for the college draft, all this other stuff.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. I hadn't really thought about it quite as like partners in opposite directions, like the president and the GM. That's interesting.
Well, I mean, that's how the Blazers work. Like Dwayne Hankins does all the, the TV stuff, the deal with, parting ways with Rude and doing all that stuff. And then all, corporate sponsorships, all that stuff. And then Joe obviously does the roster and his staff and like the GM, the GM stuff. It's two separate jobs, because it's two totally separate things. It can't really be one person doing the same stuff. So you kind of have a top person on the business side, a top person on the basketball side. What's interesting about the W team is that they have none of that in place right now, and they have to kind of build it all from zero. It's kind of a more upscaled version of what the Remix did.
Right.
In the last year. And the Remix had even less time because they announced the team in April, or not. They announced that they were getting a G League team in April, like right after the season ended in 23. They announced the team name in June. And then they started playing in November.
Yeah.
And so they literally had like 6 months of this team exists to this team is going to play its first game. The W team is going to have a little bit longer. It's going to have 8 because they announced it in September and it starts in May of 25. So that's a little over 18 months. So that's a little bit more of a normal like time frame for it to.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I'm excited for it. I know I put my ticket pre-order down, so I'm awesome. Excited for them to get all that stuff.
Kaylee gonna do some merch for that too.
That would be fantastic. I'm sure it would be down the pipeline. That would be really fun.
I don't have it in grabbing distance from me right now, but I got the plushie. I got the plushie.
That's awesome.
I have.
Yeah, we've got a couple of them at home too. I thought they were going to be much smaller, but they're really big.
I did too. It's I basically have it as like a decorative pillow on my couch.
Yep, exactly.
Because it's this big, and I thought it was going to just be like a little thing, but no, it's like a big thing. It's like a 12-inch thing. I have it. I basically have it on my couch as like a throw pillow.
Yep, that's exactly what we did too. Well, before we get out of here, where can people find more of your work, and what are you working on coming up?
So rosegardenreport.com, that's the Substack. That's where I do all the writing. I might have some remix stuff coming up soon. I'm still kind of figuring that out. But for the Blazers, for those of your listeners that are aware of the Blazers, I know this is a G League only podcast, so I don't know if
it's very small.
I don't know if that's even of interest to people, but sign up for a paid subscription. That always helps. And then I should also mention I have a role with Rip City Radio 620, the team's flagship station, where I appear on their radio show with Chad Doing, and I do some stuff for their social channels, which is at Rip City Radio on 620 for all the platforms, Twitter, Instagram, whatever else. So that's kind of where. Don't follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Blue Sky. I'm at Highkin. I still have my Twitter. I post like the bare minimum stuff on it at this point, like news, links, stuff. Don't follow me on there because I don't look at it anymore. I don't engage. But this is all kind of where you can find my stuff, though.
Awesome, cool. Yeah. Well, yeah. If anyone that's listening is not subscribed to the Rose Garden Report, I highly recommend it. It's the only way I know anything about the Blazers. Actually, it's otherwise,
you subscribed, and that's how you learned that there.
That's how I learned that there was an NBA team.
You thought just the G League was like its own thing.
I thought it was its own thing. Thought that was as much basketball as anyone got, but turns out there's a whole other level that's insane.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Thanks for joining me. Appreciate you spending some time with us this afternoon, and I'm sure I'll talk to you later on. As always, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, why don't you send it to a friend that you think might enjoy the podcast? Would really appreciate it. Either way, I appreciate you listening. Thanks for spending your time with Kenny's G League. I'll be back next week with another special guest, and we will chat again all about the G League, the remix, basketball at large. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.